Elliot Kane stood at the peak of success in the bustling heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and ambition roared louder than the subway trains. As the CEO of a luxury hotel empire spanning continents, Elliot was the epitome of wealth and power, a self-made mogul whose face graced countless business magazines. Yet behind the polished image lay a man consumed by solitude, his life confined to the glittering walls of his penthouse in the relentless pursuit of perfection. Elliot's world revolved around his work, which was meticulously managed and devoid of the human connections that make life rich. But one fateful morning, an unexpected turn of events set him on a path he never anticipated. In a place he hadn't visited since his youth, a library of all places, he encountered a woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. She wasn't part of his glamorous world, nor did she seek the wealth and power others craved. And yet, she was about to become the key to unraveling a mystery and transforming his life. What could a simple librarian offer a man who had everything? As Elliot's life intertwines with hers, secrets from the past resurface, and choices made in the shadows threaten to destroy the empire he built. The answers lie in a story of ambition, betrayal, and redemption. A story that proves even the most meticulously constructed facades can crack under the weight of truth. If you're curious about how one moment can change everything, hit the subscribe button and join us on this emotional journey. Your support helps us bring these heartfelt stories to life. Stay tuned. What happens next will surprise you. Elliot Kane's life was a carefully orchestrated symphony where every note was planned, every move calculated. At just 38, he had built Kane Luxe Resorts, a chain of exclusive hotels renowned for their luxury and innovative designs. His vision had reshaped the luxury hospitality industry, from penthouses perched atop urban skyscrapers to serene oceanfront villas. Elliot's life was perfect for the outside world, the epitome of the American dream. But inside, his world was hollow. Elliot was the eldest of 3 siblings in a modest household in rural Ohio. His father, a factory worker, and his mother, a schoolteacher, struggled to make ends meet. Elliot learned early that dreams come at a cost. He was 12 when his father lost his job during an economic downturn, forcing the family into a cycle of debt and despair. Those years of hardship ignited a relentless drive in Elliot. He vowed never to let poverty define him again. His journey was far from easy. Scholarships and part-time jobs paid for his business degree, while sleepless nights and relentless ambition propelled him into the industry. At 27, he gambled his life savings and a loan on his first boutique hotel, and against all odds, it succeeded. Over the next decade, he transformed that single property into an empire. Yet, Elliot's rise came with a price. His relationships were transactional, and his friendships were distant. He had no time for frivolities like love. His mother's passing a few years earlier had only deepened his isolation. Now, standing in his sprawling penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the dazzling Manhattan skyline, he felt the weight of his loneliness. Success, he realized, was an echoing void without anyone to share it with. Elliot frowned as he scanned the towering bookshelves lining one wall of his living room that morning. He had finished every book in his collection, and his assistant had yet to replenish it. Irritated, he decided to step outside, a rare occurrence for the workaholic CEO, and walk to the public library he remembered from his college days. He hoped it would distract him from the suffocating silence of his gilded cage. The library was a stark contrast to Elliot's usual world of luxury. Its faded wooden floors creaked under his polished shoes, and the faint scent of aged paper filled the air. Nostalgia swept over him as he wandered through the quiet aisles, his fingers trailing over the spines of books that once inspired him to dream beyond the confines of his small-town life. Lost in thought, Elliot didn't notice the young woman behind the counter until she cleared her throat. Startled, he looked up to see her smiling at him. She was striking in her simplicity. Long dark hair pulled back into a loose braid, bright blue eyes framed by glasses, and an air of calm confidence that seemed to ground the chaos around her. The name tag on her blouse read, Grace Wells. "Can I help you find something?" Grace asked, her tone polite but warm. For a moment, Elliot was uncharacteristically tongue-tied. People usually sought him out, not the other way around. Philosophy, he finally said, his voice unusually hesitant. Something on purpose and meaning. Grace raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the request. That's a heavy topic for a Tuesday morning, she said with a small laugh. But I know just the thing. She led him to a quiet corner of the library, her steps light yet purposeful. Elliot followed, his curiosity piqued. Grace's presence was a puzzle, serene yet commanding, unassuming yet unforgettable. She handed him a book, The Courage to Be by Paul Tillich, and waited for his reaction. Elliot glanced at the cover, then at Grace. Have you read it? Several times, she replied. It's about finding courage in the face of life's uncertainties. It might not solve your problems, but it could make you think differently about them. Her words hit closer to home than she could have imagined. For years, Elliot had avoided confronting the emptiness in his life. It's not about necessity, Elliot replied, surprising himself with sincerity. I'd just like to talk more. About books, life, purpose. Grace studied him for a long moment before nodding. All right, but only if we keep it simple. Simple works for me, Elliot said, smiling for the first time in ages. As he returned to his penthouse, Elliot couldn't help but feel that something had shifted. For the first time in years, his tightly controlled world felt unpredictable and strangely exciting. Elliot Kane wasn't used to nerves. He had pitched billion-dollar deals to skeptical investors and addressed crowded auditoriums with practiced ease. Yet, as he arrived at the modest restaurant Grace had chosen for their dinner, he found himself uncharacteristically anxious. The restaurant was worlds apart from the upscale establishments he frequented. No valet parking, no crystal chandeliers, just a warm glow of candlelight and the hum of soft jazz. It was simple, unassuming, and utterly unlike the life he had built for himself. Grace arrived a few minutes later, her hair loosely curled and outfit understated but elegant. Elliot noticed how effortlessly she carried herself as if she did not need to impress anyone, a quality he found refreshing and intimidating. Sorry I'm late, she said with a slight smile, setting her worn leather pouch on the back of her chair. Had to finish cataloging a batch of new arrivals at the library. No problem, Elliot replied, gesturing for her to sit. I was early. The evening unfolded in a way Elliot hadn't anticipated. Grace wasn't dazzled by his achievements or eager to probe into his wealth, as most people he encountered were. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions about his favorite books, childhood, and what drove him to pursue his ambitious career. Her genuine curiosity disarmed him, and before he realized it, he was revealing pieces of himself he rarely shared with anyone. Grace, too, opened up, albeit cautiously. She spoke about her love for literature and her decision to leave a corporate publishing job in Chicago to work at a small-town library. It's not glamorous, she admitted, but it's fulfilling. I like giving people access to stories that can change their lives. Elliot marveled at her sincerity. It's rare to meet someone who values meaning over success, he said, his voice softer than usual. Most people I know are chasing the next big thing. Grace chuckled. Success isn't bad, but it's not the only thing. Sometimes, the most meaningful moments are the ones that don't make headlines. Her words lingered in Elliot's mind long after their plates were cleared and the check paid. As they parted ways that evening, he realized that Grace had given him something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of perspective. The following day, Elliot woke with an unfamiliar sense of anticipation, replayed snippets of their conversation, marveling at how Grace's worldview challenges his own. For years, his life had been defined by metrics, profits, expansions, accolades, but now, he began to wonder if there was more to life than the relentless pursuit of goals. His reverie was interrupted by a call from his business partner, Victor Harrington. Victor's voice was animated as he shared news of an exciting opportunity, a partnership with Dominic Russo, a real estate tycoon interested in developing eco-luxury resorts. It was a deal that could catapult Kane Lux Resorts into a new league of global influence. Russo's hosting a dinner party next week, Victor explained. He wants us to bring our partners. You'll come with someone, right? Elliot hesitated. He would have brushed off such a question with a quick excuse in the past, but this time, he found himself considering Grace. He had no doubt she would find such an event entirely out of her element, But he also couldn't shake the thought of how she might see through the superficiality of it all, and how he might see it differently through her eyes. "I'll bring someone," Elliot finally said, a plan forming in his mind. Over the next few days, Elliot and Grace met frequently. Sometimes, they wandered through bookstores discussing their favorite authors. Other times, they simply sat in the park, sharing quiet moments away from the city's noise. Slowly but surely, Elliot began to open up about his life, revealing his childhood struggles and the sacrifices he had made to get where he was. Grace, in turn, shared pieces of her past. She spoke of her father, a factory worker who lost his job during the same economic downturn affecting Elliot's family. "We almost lost our house," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "But my dad fought hard to keep it. He always said it was our anchor, the one thing we could hold on to when everything else felt uncertain." Elliot froze at her words, a memory surfacing that he hadn't thought about in years. For years ago, his company had acquired land for a new hotel project, a plot in a struggling neighborhood requiring several homes removal. At the time, his partner Victor had assured him that all legal and ethical measures were followed, but something about Grace's story sent a chill down his spine. "Where was this house?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Grace gave him the neighborhood's name, and Elliot's heart sank. It was the same area where his company had built the Lux Heights Hotel, one of his most profitable ventures. He hadn't been involved in the acquisition details, trusting Victor to handle it while he attended to other matters. But now, a gnawing Grace stared at Elliot, her curiosity turning into apprehension. "What about the house?" she asked cautiously. Elliot extended the file, his hand trembling slightly. "I found something you need to see. But first, I need you to know that I wasn't aware of this until now." Grace took the file and flipped through the documents. Her eyes scanned the pages, her expression hardening with each line. The papers detailed the acquisition of her family's property, including the tactics to pressure her parents into leaving. Among them was a letter from Victor to the project team, instructing them to resolve the matter quickly and discreetly. "So it was your company," Grace said quietly, her voice laced with bitterness. "You destroyed my family's home." "Grace, I swear I didn't know," Elliot pleaded. "At the time, I trusted my partner to handle the acquisitions ethically. I was focused on other projects and never imagined." "But it was your company, Elliot," she interrupted, her blue eyes blazing with anger. "You may not have known, but you're still responsible. Do you have any idea what that house meant to us? It wasn't just a building, my father's pride, my mother's sanctuary. It was everything we had." Elliot felt the weight of her words like a punch to the gut. He had spent his entire career believing he was building something extraordinary, but now he realized that success had come at a cost he hadn't anticipated. "I can't undo what happened," he said softly, "but I want to make it right. Tell me what I can do." Grace shook her head, her expression a mixture of hurt and disappointment. "You can't bring back what we lost, and you can't erase the pain it caused. Maybe instead of trying to fix things, you should take a long, hard look at what you've built and ask yourself if it was worth it." With that, she returned the file to him and walked away, leaving Elliot alone on the library steps. For the first time in years, he felt utterly powerless. The days that followed were some of the hardest Elliot had ever faced. Grace stopped answering his calls, and the growing distance between them was unbearable. Yet her words lingered, forcing him to confront the uncomfortable truth about his empire. Elliot began scrutinizing every project his company had undertaken, digging into the records to uncover other unethical practices. What he found shocked him. Victor had used similar tactics in several deals, prioritizing profits over people. Furious, Elliot confronted Victor in his office. "How could you do this behind my back?" he demanded, slamming the files onto the desk. Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but unapologetic. "We're running a business, Elliot. Sometimes, you have to make tough calls. You think those hotels would have been built if we hadn't pushed a little harder? This isn't pushing," Elliot shot back. "This is exploitation. People lost their homes because of us, because of you. And I let it happen by trusting you." Victor shrugged. "It's too late to change the past. What matters is that we're successful now." "No," Elliot said firmly. What matters is doing the right thing. And I can't do that with someone who values money over integrity. Victor's eyes narrowed. Are you firing me? I am, Elliot replied, his voice steady. Effective immediately. Victor stood, his expression dark with anger. You'll regret this. Maybe, Elliot said. But at least I'll be able to live with myself. With Victor gone, Elliot focused on repairing the damage his company had caused. He contacted the families displaced by his projects, offering financial compensation and help finding new homes. He knew it wouldn't erase the pain, but it was a step toward making amends. Finally, he came to Grace's family. Her parents were reluctant to meet with him, but after much persuasion, they agreed. Sitting in their modest apartment, Elliot listened as they recounted the struggle of losing their home and rebuilding their lives. I can't change what happened, Elliot said earnestly, but I want to help in any way I can. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please tell me. Grace's father studied him for a long moment before nodding. It won't bring back the past, but it's good to see a man willing to own up to his mistakes. That's rare these days. Encouraged by their forgiveness, Elliot wrote a substantial check to cover the debt they had incurred and promised to support their community. Grace's return. One evening, as Elliot finalized a plan to establish an ethics committee within his company, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Grace. Meet me at the library tomorrow at 6 p.m. When Elliot arrived, Grace was waiting for him in the philosophy section, where they had first met. She looked at him with caution and something softer, perhaps hope. I heard what you've been doing, she said, her voice steady. Reaching out to the families, firing Victor, setting up the ethics committee. That's not the Elliot Kane I read about in magazines. I've changed, he said simply. Or at least, I'm trying to. Grace nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's not just about making amends, Elliot. It's about who you want to be moving forward. So, who is that? Elliot hesitated, then smiled. Someone who values people as much as progress. Someone who understands that success means nothing without integrity. For the first time in weeks, Grace smiled back. That's a good answer. They talked long into the evening, rediscovering the connection that had drawn them together. By the time they parted, Elliot felt a flicker of hope that he hadn't lost her after all. As Elliot left the library that evening, the city's lights seemed a little brighter, the air a little lighter. Grace's smile had rekindled something inside him, a fragile, cautious hope. She hadn't forgiven him entirely, but she was willing to listen, and that was more than he dared to expect. Over the next few weeks, Elliot and Grace began to rebuild their connection, brick by brick. Their initial interactions were tentative, filled with quiet conversations and shared silences. Grace remained wary, not yet fully trusting that Elliot's transformation was genuine. Elliot, on the other hand, was determined to prove that his intentions were sincere, not through grand gestures but through consistent actions. One of them invited Grace to visit one of his ongoing hotel projects. I want Saturday and afternoons different this time, he assured her. I want you to see how I'm trying to do things better. Curious but skeptical, Grace agreed. They drove to a site on the city's outskirts, where Elliot's team built an eco-friendly hotel that seamlessly blended into its natural surroundings. The project was designed to minimize environmental impact and involved partnerships with local artisans and businesses. Grace noticed how Elliot interacted with his team as they toured the site. He wasn't the aloof, commanding CEO she had imagined. Instead, he listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and treated everyone, from the architects to the construction workers, respectfully. At one point, they stopped to admire the view from a partially completed terrace overlooking a lush valley. This is what I want to build now, Elliot said quietly. Places that enhance their surroundings instead of dominating them. Places that bring people together instead of tearing communities apart. Grace looked at him, her skepticism softening. It's a good start, she admitted. But it will take more than one project to fix what's broken. I know, Elliot said, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying. Just as Elliot and Grace's relationship blossomed, a storm loomed on the horizon. One morning, Elliot received a call from his legal team. A journalist had uncovered documents linking Kane Lux Resorts to Victor's past unethical practices. The journalist was preparing to publish a scathing exposé, and Elliot's reputation and the future of his company was at stake. Deny everything, one of his lawyers advised. Blame it all on Victor. The evidence points to him anyway, but Elliot refused. He knew deflecting blame would only perpetuate the cycle of dishonesty that had brought him to this point. Instead, he decided to confront the issue head-on. At a press conference, Elliot stood before a room packed with reporters. Grace watched from the back, her expression unreadable. Taking a deep breath, Elliot began. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to take full responsibility for the mistakes my company has made in the past. While I was unaware of certain actions taken under my leadership, I understand that ignorance is not an excuse. I should have been more vigilant, and I am deeply sorry." He outlined his steps to address the issues: firing Victor, compensating the affected families, and implementing stricter ethical guidelines for all future projects. "This is not about damage control," he concluded. "It's about doing what's right. And I am committed to rebuilding this company on a foundation of integrity." The room was silent for a moment before the questions began. Some reporters were skeptical, others outright hostile. But Elliot answered each question with honesty and composure, refusing to shy away from the truth. When the press conference ended, Elliot found Grace waiting for him outside. "That was brave," she said quietly. "It was necessary," he replied. "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't own up to it." Grace nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're starting to look like the man you want to be." Her words filled Elliot with a quiet sense of pride, but he knew the journey was far from over. As they walked away together, he realized that the road to redemption wasn't just about fixing the past but building a future he could be proud of. In the aftermath of the press conference, Elliot felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The weight of secrecy and denial was gone, replaced by a cautious optimism that he could rebuild his company and life. However, he knew his journey wasn't one where he could walk alone. Grace had become his anchor, her perspective a guiding light in the fog of his ambition. One evening, over coffee at a cozy bookstore cafe, Elliot shared an idea brewing in his mind. "Grace, I've been thinking about creating something different. Not just another hotel, but a community center. A place where people can gather, learn, and grow. A space that celebrates stories and gives back to the neighborhoods we've impacted." Grace's eyes lit up with curiosity. "You want to turn a profit on that too?" she teased, though her tone was warm. Elliot chuckled. "Not everything is about profit. I want this to be a non-profit, something that uses my resources for good. And I'd like your help." "My help?" Grace raised an eyebrow. "I'm just a librarian." "You're more than that," Elliot said earnestly. "You understand people in a way I don't. You see the value in things most people overlook." "That's exactly the perspective I need." Grace hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "It's a big commitment." "I know," Elliot said, "but I can't think of anyone better for the job." After a long pause, Grace smiled. "All right, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right. No cutting corners, no half measures." "Agreed," Elliot said, his smile mirroring hers. Together, they began drafting plans for the community center. Grace's input was invaluable, from suggesting literacy programs for underprivileged kids to organizing workshops for aspiring small business owners. As they worked, Elliot saw a new side of Grace, her passion for helping others and her unwavering determination to make a difference. In turn, Grace began to see Elliot not as the cold, calculating businessman she had once imagined, but as someone striving to redefine his legacy. Their bond deepened, built on mutual respect and a shared vision for a better future. As the plans for the community center gained momentum, a new challenge arose. Victor, Elliot's former partner, had resurfaced, this time threatening legal action. He claimed Elliot had wrongfully terminated their partnership and demanded a share of the company's profits. Elliot's legal team advised him to settle quietly, but he refused. "This isn't about money," he told Grace. "It's about standing up for what's right. If I give in to him now, everything I've worked for, everything we're building, will be compromised." Grace admired Elliot's resolve, but worried about the toll the battle would take on him. She knew Victor's tactics would be ruthless, dredging up every mistake Elliot had ever made in an attempt to discredit him. The court case became a media spectacle, with Victor accusing Elliot of hypocrisy and greed. Elliot, however, stood his ground, presenting a detailed account of Victor's unethical actions and emphasizing the steps he had taken to rectify past wrongs. Grace attended every hearing, and her presence was a quiet source of strength for Elliot. The turning point came when a former employee of Victor's came forward, providing evidence that Victor had acted unethically and embezzled funds from the company. The revelation shifted public opinion, and the court ruled in Elliot's favor. As the case closed, Elliot felt a mix of relief and vindication. He turned to Grace, who had been his unwavering support throughout the ordeal. "I couldn't have done this without you," he admitted. Grace smiled, her eyes soft with affection. "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." Their victory was more than a legal triumph. It was a reaffirmation of their shared values and the strength of their partnership. It solidified their belief that standing up for integrity was always worth it, no matter how difficult. With the legal battle behind him, Elliot Kane could finally focus on the future. The community center, now named the Story Haven, was taking shape in a revitalized neighborhood that had once been a victim of his company's expansion. The irony wasn't lost on Elliot. It was the same area where Grace's family had once lived. Grace threw herself into the project, curating book collections, organizing partnerships with local artists, and drafting a schedule of events that ranged from literacy workshops to community gatherings. Elliot watched her work with awe, realizing how much this project meant to her and him. On the day of the grand opening, the center buzzed with activity. Families explored the library, children's laughter echoed from the play area, and community leaders mingled with journalists. Elliot stood in a corner, quietly observing, until Grace joined him. "You should say something," she said, nudging him gently. Elliot hesitated. Public speaking was second nature to him, but this felt different, more personal. Finally, he stepped onto a small stage and addressed the crowd. "This center is more than a building," he began. "It's a promise that businesses can and should give back to the communities they serve. My focus was on growth at any cost for too long, which was a mistake. But today, with the help of an incredible team and one extraordinary woman, we're starting to make things right." His eyes found Grace in the crowd, her smile encouraging him to continue. "The Story Haven is a place where stories are shared, people are valued, and hope is cultivated. I'm honored to be part of this, and I can't wait to see how it grows." The applause was thunderous, but what mattered most to Elliot was the pride he saw in Grace's eyes. He stepped off the stage and joined her, the weight of his past replaced by the promise of their future. The Story Haven became a beacon of hope for the community as the weeks passed. Elliot and Grace spent countless evenings there, sharing quiet moments in the library or brainstorming new program ideas. Their partnership had grown beyond the professional. It was clear to everyone around them that they were deeply in love. One evening, after a particularly successful event, Elliot asked Grace to join him for a walk. The night air was excellent, the city lights casting a soft glow over the streets. They strolled in comfortable silence until they reached a small park. "Grace," Elliot began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "meeting you changed everything for me. You challenged me, held me accountable, and showed me what it means to live with purpose. I don't just want to build a better future, I want to build it with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple but elegant ring, its design inspired by the architecture of the Story Haven. Grace's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. "Elliot, I've seen the best and worst of you, and what I see now is someone willing to grow, to learn, and to love. Yes, I'll marry you." Their embrace under the starlit sky was witnessed only by the quiet trees and the distant hum of the city, but for Elliot and Grace, it felt like the start of something monumental. Years later, Elliot and Grace Kane sat side by side in the library of their home, their hands entwined as they read. The Story Haven had expanded to multiple locations, each a testament to their shared vision of community and connection. Elliot had redefined his legacy, not as a businessman but as a builder of bridges between people, dreams, and possibilities. Their love had become the cornerstone of their lives, a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and the courage to confront their flaws. As they turned the pages of their respective books, the quiet was filled with the peace that comes from knowing you've done your best, not just for yourself, but for the world around you. And in that simple, shared moment, they knew they had created something extraordinary, a story worth telling. Dear viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel if this story touches your heart. Your support helps us continue sharing these inspiring tales of hope, redemption, and love. Thank you for being part of our journey.